Guys, what's up? How's it going? This is Kazi from cleverprogrammer.com. Welcome back to yet another tutorial. Write your first Django app part 5. I said part 5 in the last one, but I really mean to say it now. So, with that said, I hope you're excited. Let's jump right into it. And today, wait, hold on. Do you guys hear that? What is that? Is that Dumpy?
No big deal. Django, framework, Python 3.6, Flask. I can do it all. I can do it all.
Wow, guys, I really can't believe that actually he's here. Yeah, well, anyways, I really hope that I don't see any more of him. So let's continue anyways. So what are we doing in this tutorial? We are going to be doing a lot of automated testing, okay? So what the hell is automated testing? Well, here, let me break it down in a simple, easy to understand way for you mere mortals out there. Let's say you have something like Amazon, right? Something giant with millions of lines of code. Are you really gonna, like, every time you add a new feature, are you gonna test all of the older features to make sure that they're working correctly? Probably not. It's gonna take up a lot of your time, plus you're gonna kill yourself. So what you're gonna do is actually write these automated tests. So every time you add a new feature to Amazon, let's say that you add this new cool feature that recommends new shoes, you want to make sure that the ability when user clicks add to cart, that still works. When a user clicks checkout, that still works. So what you would normally do is go and manually test it, except because Amazon is so big, you're not going to be doing that. So you're going to write automated tests that'll test all of those things every time you add a new feature. So when you add a new feature, it automatically tests everything that was before it. That's the point of testing, okay? That's kind of the beautiful thing about it, okay? So why you need to create tests? Tests will save you time. Yep, they will save you a lot of time, because let's say you were to run into a bug or some unexpected behavior, you will know exactly why it's happening, or you'll catch on to it a lot faster if you have code that tests those things as you go along, rather than waiting till everything breaks, the whole world comes falling down, and then you're like, wait, what went wrong? Yeah, good luck finding the bug in your millions of lines of code, right? You want to quality test each thing as it comes in. Tests don't just identify problems, they prevent them, okay? So this helps you identify any problematic new bugs that could be coming in, and not only like identify them, but prevent them before it even happens. Almost think of testing kind of like if you just hired people without interviewing them. I mean, you wouldn't know, right? You would hire people like this guy, and you would have people who you would have no control over, don't know. And like, let's say something was going wrong in your company, you're not going to know who to blame because you never really tested any person, right? But if you run through an interview or a test with them, then oftentimes you don't even have to hire them, and you can kind of prevent it before that problem spreads. Or if they're awesome, then you can add them in, right, to your company. Tests also make your code more attractive. So basically, like, your code will look nice if you have tests. Otherwise, developers won't take you seriously. And tests help teams work together. So if your team is working, and some complex applications will be maintained by teams, right? And tests guarantee that colleagues don't inadvertently break your code, and that you don't break theirs without knowing. So this way, it also helps when you get employed and you have a job, you know, it'll help you identify like where the problem is coming from, and the people who are working with you on your team, they know exactly what you're thinking, and won't cause problems in your code either. So those are the benefits of testing. Now you have some basic testing strategies, something called test-driven development. It's a pretty common thing. It's called TDD, okay? And basically, it's like testing as you go, rather than wait till I write my millions of lines of code and then freaking test it, right? Wait till I have 30 employees and then I'll ask them and interview them and find out. Like, don't do that. test as you go. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to write our first test. So, we identify a bug. Look at that. Well, they purposely planted a bug in our code, and now we're going to use testing to solve it, okay? We're going to go Sherlock Holmes. All right, so fortunately, there's a little bug in the polls application for us to fix right away. The question was published recently. So you guys remember that little method we had was published recently in our models for question? Well, it had a little bug, and basically how it works is the method returns true if the question was published within the last day, which is correct. So if it was within the last 24 hours, it shows you true, but it also shows you true if it was published in the future, okay? So it shouldn't say that it's recent if it was going to happen in the future, right? You wouldn't say, I recently got a car if you're going to get a car 20 years from now when you finally get a job, right? So I'm just kidding. You probably already have a job. I don't. Let's continue. To check if the bug really exists, using the admin, create a question whose date lies in the future and check the method using the shell. So first, we're going to check what's going on using the shell. All right, so let's go back to our code. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is run our Python. So where are we going to run that from? We're going to do Python manage.py shell. Don't just do Python and hit enter like an idiot, like I kind of did. So once you run the Python with this particular shell, then what happens is you can like import your, models and everything. Okay, so now import datetime. We're gonna do from Django.utils import time zone, and then we're gonna do from polls.models import question. With that said, now we're gonna create a question instance with a publication date 30 days in the future. Okay, so how does this work? We're going to create a variable called future question, and we're going to create it from the question class, and we will say the pub date is equal to timezone.now. So we're saying that it's published right now, and then but to that timezone.now we're going to add some time to it. Okay, so we're going to do datetime dot time delta, and we will do days is equal to 30, just like that. Okay, and then we're gonna hit enter. So what I'm saying is like right now plus 30 days, which in other words translates 30 days from now, right? So basically right now where I am at and what my current day for me is February 20th, okay, 2018. So it's gonna do February 20th plus 30 days after February 20th, okay? So no, it's not going to be February 50th. It's going to be March something, right? Cool. Was it published recently? Now we're going to ask it, and it should say no, it's not published recently, right? It should return false, except that it returns true. So there you have it. We know that something with our code is broken, right? So since things in the future are not recent, this is clearly wrong. Now we're going to create a test to expose the bug. So right now we expose the bug through the command line, right? We just use the interactive terminal shell, but like you don't want to be doing that every single time. You also don't want to be doing that manually every single time. So we're going to write a test for it. They'll automatically test it for us. Okay, cool. So now we're going to go into our test file and write this code, and then I'll kind of break it down. So under our polls app, we're going to go into our tests, and we will paste this guy here. Okay, I copied over everything and I pasted it over it. So what's going on? We're importing datetime just like we did in the shell. We're importing time zone, we're importing test case, and we're importing the question model from our models. And how is this working? The class is, we're calling it question model test. So the good idea is like every time you want to test a model, make a class for that test. Okay, so this way it's nice and organized. This class inherits from test case. That's coming from here. You kind of put that in without really thinking about it. Okay, just like look at what the Django docs is saying and then just like follow it all along. It's not necessary for you to like learn about this test case class and how it's being inherited and like get a PhD in it. You can, but it's not necessary. And then for the name of the function that you're testing, you want to, a good practice, you want to like break each thing you're testing, have a function for that particularly, right? So for example, if I go into my models, I have a method called was published recently. So since we want to test that specific method under that class, look, I'm doing test was published recently, right? And name the test, make it pretty specific. So somebody who's reading your test method or your test function should kind of know what it's supposed to do just from reading the name. So we're testing was published recently, but with future question. So what if the question was like published 30 days in advance, right? Here's the documentation for it. Was published recently returns false for questions whose publication date is in the future. Cool. That's what it's supposed to do, except it doesn't do that. So now we're checking this. Okay, we're saying, hey, set the time to 30 days from now. That's what this is doing. And then we make the future question just from question class, and then we set the publication date to that particular time from here, line 16. And then on line 18, we're just saying, hey, assert if this is this. However, this turns to true as we saw earlier, right? Like right here. So this is this whole thing, if you run it right now, is gonna turn to true. And that's really the problem that we're having, right? And we need to fix that. Our test will expose it. How do we run our test? We're just gonna go to our command line and we're gonna do Python manage.py test polls. So I'm gonna exit out of this, exit. And now I will simply do Python manage.py test polls. So what I'm saying is like test the polls app, and then it'll automatically basically run the test.py file inside of the polls app that you created. Run it, and look, it says failures is equal to 1. And basically it says assertion error. It tried this line, self.assert is, and what it found out was this was not this. And so it's an assertion error, and it says true is not false. Now, if this whole thing evaluated to false, which is it's supposed to, then it would go false is false, and then this thing would return true, and it would throw any errors, okay? Now, as you have more and more tests in here, all you'll have to do is just run that once, or you can set up a way where it runs that once automatically, and that way it'll only alert you if something is broken. Otherwise, it'll just go silently. That's the beauty of tests. By the way, have you guys ever heard the song Fly Me to the Moon by Frank Sinatra? Oh my god, like I've been in love with it and I can't stop thinking about it. It's like playing in my head non-stop. Anyways, let's continue. So what happened is this. Python manage.py test polls looked for tests in the polls application. And I've explained that to you already. It found a subclass of the Django.test case. Subclass. It created a special database for the purpose of testing. If I go here, look, it says destroying test database. So it created its own database from what was happening right now. It looked for test methods, ones whose names begin with test. Okay, so it's looking for everything that starts with test. If you don't have these starting with test, it won't find it, okay? So like, let's just say it was like this, and I'll hit save, and then we'll also run this, test polls, and it didn't even find it. It said it ran 0 tests in 0 seconds. But as soon as I do that, and if I run it, boom, ran. It created in test was published recently with future question. It created a question instance whose publication field is 30 days in the future, right over here. And using the assert is method discovered that it was published recently returns true, though we wanted to return false, what we found out here. Cool. The test informs us which test failed and even the line on which the failure occurred. So here, it'll tell us which line we failed on, line 18, right? This is line 18. Cool. So now we're going to go ahead and fix this bug. How are we going to fix it? Well, this is the code that's going to help us fix it. We already know what the problem is. amend the method in models.py so it will return true if the date is also in the past. So we're going to go into models, and we will change this to this. Indentation and white space in Python is important, so make sure it's indented correctly underneath this was published recently method. And basically we're saying, hey, set the time zone to now, like exactly right now, and then subtract 1 day from now. If that's less than or equal to the published, and check if that's less than or equal to the self.published date. Okay, so if that's less than or equal to the published date, and then check if self.published date is less than or equal to now. Okay, so in other words, check that this publication date is in between this and this. Does that make sense? It has to be sandwiched between the two. And run the test again. So now I'm going to hit save, and I will simply run the test again. And now look, it says ran one test, and it gave me an OK, and it's saying destroying the database. So cool. It looks like it had no errors. It ran all the tests successfully. If it showed me something red or said failures, I'd know something failed. So now it's working. Cool. Now we can also do, after identifying a bug, we wrote a test that exposes it and corrected the bug in the code so our test passes. Many other things might go wrong with our application in the future, but we can be sure that we won't inadvertently reintroduce this bug. So it'll automatically keep checking it, and we're not going to be reintroducing this bug because we'll always find it. Because simply running the test will warn us immediately. We can consider this little portion of the application pinned down safely forever. Pretty cool. I think that's pretty freaking cool. And now they're like, all right, we're going to get into some more comprehensive tests. While we're here, we can further pin down the was published recently method. In fact, it would be positively embarrassing if in fixing one bug, we had introduced another. Cool. Add 2 more test methods to the same class to test the behavior of the method more comprehensively. So now we're gonna test the was published recently method with old question, and then we're also gonna test it with recent question, and we already have the future question. So you can only have 3 cases: future question, recent question, or old question. If a question is older than 1 day, it should basically say that it's not, if the question is older than 1 day, it should return false. It should say it's not recent. If it's in the future, it should say it's not recent. If it's been posted less than 1 day, then it should say it's recent. So for example, if we just look at this test code at a high level, old question, look, it's making sure that it's asserting to be false. So if it's 1 day and 1 second ago, right? So if it's exactly 1 day ago, then what it should do is it should say, yes, it's still true. But if it's 1 day and 1 second ago, now it should say it's too late and it should be considered false. Okay, it should be considered not recent. And then publish recently with recent question. So if the question is, as you can see here, not even 1 day ago, 23 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds ago, almost 1 day, it should assert it to be true. Okay. I'm going to take these and we will go into our tests, and we will add this into our tests. Okay. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so just make sure that it's all indented correctly, and then you should be good there. So now we have all of those scenarios covered: future, old, or recent question. Let's run our test and let's see if we have any bugs. No bugs. It looks like our method is working perfectly. Okay. Just so you understand this code right here, it'll only return true when the publication date is in between this and that. Okay. So this is basically saying it's within 1 day, and this is saying it's less than now. Okay, so if this is in between, it'll match. And now we have 3 tests that confirm the question was published recently, return sensible values for past, recent, future questions. Good. Again, polls is a simple application, but however complex it grows in the future and whatever other code it interacts with, we now have some guarantee that the method we have written tests for will behave in expected ways. Test the view. So you can also test views. The polls application is fairly undiscriminating. It will publish any question, including ones whose publication date field lies in the future. We should improve this. Setting a publication date in the future should mean that the question is published at that moment, but invisible until then. All right, so what are we doing here? Well, when we post our question, if it's some date in the future, it shouldn't show it. Just like, for example, on WordPress, if you publish a blog post for, let's say, 2 days later, it doesn't show until 2 days later, right? You can schedule your post. Or on YouTube, sometimes I schedule my videos. And, I'll say, show this video to the audience in 1 week from now, right? So if I do show it from 1 week from now, it shouldn't be showing it at that same time. That would be crazy. That wouldn't make sense. Just like that, we also want to do with our questions and make sure that it doesn't just show out of nowhere. And we want to make a test for a view. When we fix the bug above, we wrote the test first and then the code to fix it. In fact, that was a simple example of test-driven development, but it doesn't really matter in which order we do the work. In our first test, we focus closely on the internal behavior of the code. For this test, we want to check its behavior as it would be experienced by a user through a web browser, okay? So the first one, it was like the logic of the code. This one, we're focusing on what happens if the user is like testing it and the user is actually on the front end of the website. What does it show to them? And isn't that cool that you can automatically test that every time your code runs and you don't have to like go and check if your cart is working or your blog is showing, things like that. All right, so the Django test client. So here's a command. We're going to go in our command line and type in. So I'm going to copy this guy again. And remember, we got to do Python manage.py shell, then paste this guy, and then we will get setup test environment, just like that. Okay. Installs a template renderer, which will allow us to blah, 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 blah. Okay. We will get this guy, and then we will. Also, they say something about time zone, so make sure your time zone is correct. Mine is in America/Los Angeles. If I go in my settings and show you, for you it might be something different. So you can go to this link and look up what your time zone is. Okay. So we're going to import the client, and then we're going to create an instance of the client. So here we're creating an instance. And now we can get a response from our home page. Now, when the response from your home page should give you something like not found or a 404, it's because if you go to your home page, there's nothing there, right? If you just go to right now your local host 127.0.0.1:8000, it should give you an error. The only routes that are mapped is like if you go to /admin or if you go to /polls. Remember that. So that's why the home is giving us a 404 right now. We should expect a 404 from that address. Let's just do response.status code, and here it is, 404. We should expect to find something at polls though, okay? So let's try that. We'll use reverse rather than a hard-coded URL. So instead of doing like you know, whatever slash polls, we're gonna just do a reverse here. Okay, so from Django, we're gonna import reverse, and we'll paste this guy right here. And now if we do response.status code, it shows me something. If I do response, it's saying template response status code is 200, and it's a text/HTML file, which it is. Okay, and now we can also get the content. We can do response.content. So now it's showing me the content of that file. And if you remember, we do have an unordered list in the start, and then we have bullet points. So here you have what's cracking. In HTML, to show an apostrophe, they have to do this: ampersand, number sign, 39, semicolon. That's basically apostrophe. And we also have our other question, what's new? And you can see their links here as well. Okay, so this is like just showing the code version of what the user or we actually see on the front end. And we can also do response.context and get the latest question list. And look, it gave us the questions: what's cracking, what's new, what's up. Now we can improve our view as well. The list of polls, the list of polls shows polls that aren't published yet. Those that have publication date in the future, let's fix that. So, right, that's a problem. So we need to fix that. We introduce a class-based view based on list view. So we're going to go ahead and fix things in there. Now we need to amend it. So let's go to our views and our index view. We need to fix this and change it so that it also checks the date by comparing it with timezone.now. First, we need to add an import. So at the top of our code, we're going to add this here, import timezone. And then our query set, we're going to change it a bit. So where's our query set? All right, can we put this on one line so it looks slightly less confusing? Yeah, we're fine. We're not following PEP 8. We're running across a little bit, but according to my boy Raymond the OG Hedinger, according to him, he says 90 to 95 characters should be good enough. PEP 8, I think, with the whole 80 character line is kind of stupid. Because honestly, breaking this down into new lines messes up the code readability. But right now, this looks pretty easy to read if you just have it. Much easier if you just have it on one line. Anyway, okay, what is it doing? It returns the last 5 published questions, not including those set to be published in the future. All right. So how is it doing that? It's taking the questions model. It's finding all the objects, and it's filtering those objects and only finding the following. Okay. This statement here. It's looking at the publication date, and it's only finding, so this underscore LTE means you're doing a reverse search and you're saying less than or equal to. That's what LTE means, less than or equal to. So any publication date that was less than or equal to the current time, meaning only past or current posts, filter those. And then once we find those, we order those by descending publication date. So which one was the most recent ones? And then we show the first 5. That's it. Okay. A lot going on. And now we can also test our new view. So now you can satisfy yourself that this behaves as expected by firing up the run server, loading the site in your browser, creating questions with dates in the past and future, and checking that only those that have been published are listed. You don't want to have to do that every single time you make a change that might affect this. So let's create a test based on our shell session above. Seashells. She sells seashells down the seashore. Okay, add the following to polls/test.py. Polls. pass. All right, we're adding reverse. Boom. And we'll create a shortcut function to create questions as well as a new test class. So this will create questions for us. Cool. Since this is not going to be a method, it's going to be a function. We're going to put it outside like that. This will create questions. How will it create questions? You give it a question text and you give it days. And then what it does is it'll create a question with that number of days in the future or with that number of days in the past, based on whether you pass in a positive number here or a negative number here or something like 0. Okay, right here. And then it goes into question.objects and it creates that object in questions class. And for the question text keyword argument, it passes in question text. And for the pub date keyword argument, it passes in the time which it gets from here. Cool. Cool. Okay, so question view index. What are we doing there? Question index view test. So we're creating a new class here. So I'm going to go right there and paste it and save. So now we're creating tests for our index view instead of model. Okay, so this is our model test. And what we're saying is like test no questions. If no question exists, an appropriate message is displayed. So if I go into my views and you can see in my views, let's see, is it there? Is it not there? Or is it in our yeah, I think it's in our HTML, right? Index. So here you can see it says if there are recent questions, then show them, else say no polls are available. So we want to test that it actually does say no polls are available on our front end. We can actually do that and right here, and we say, hey, first check that the status code for this page is a 200, meaning that you actually find this page. Second, test that response that you find, it contains no polls are available. Okay, so right now, remember, we have no questions at the moment. And then also make sure that the cert query set is equal to the response is equal to the following. So this thing, latest question list, should be empty. That makes sense, right? That means there are no questions. So it should say no polls are available, and it should check that this is actually just an empty list. Cool. Now what we want to do is test past questions. Okay, again, this could go on. Could this go on one line, or this will be too crazy? This is pretty crazy, so I can break that up a little bit. No, it's fine. Still readable for me. Okay, so we're saying if we create a question, okay, again, this creates its own database, so it doesn't have our what's cracking and whatever tests available anymore. For these tests, it creates its own database, and then it destroys that database afterward. So within this database, we're creating a question, and the question text will be called past question instead of what's cracking or what's popping or whatever. And we're going to say that it should be 30. It should have been created 30 days ago. Okay, so this is a past question, hence test past question. And then what we're going to say is, hey, response, get that particular page. And once we get that page, we want to say, hey, are the latest questions of that page contain that question? And the answer will be yes, it does, because we just created it right here. And if this thing is equal to this, then the test should pass. We're also going to create a future question. So this should test a question 30 days in the future. Pretty much the same thing. And make sure the response contains no polls are available. That makes sense, right? Because if the question is in the future, then it shouldn't be available right now. So it should say no polls are available. And also make sure that the response.context latest question is empty, because there are no latest questions. It's going to be posted in the future. Okay. Cool. And let's check this guy with recent and past questions. Again, I think it's a little bit more readable like that. You can break it down like this. That should be fine too, but I like it like this. And basically what we're testing here is that this thing should equal to this thing. And what's going on here? The doc for this says, this is test future question and past question. Even if both past and future questions exist, only past questions are displayed. That makes sense too. And how does it work? We create a question 30 days in the past. We create a question 30 days in the future. Question 1 is called past question. Question 2 is called future question. We get the polls index page. And then we say that this thing, the latest question list, should only have the past question that was created 30 days ago and not the recent question. And it should match that. And indeed, and it should, right? If we did everything right. We shouldn't get an error if we run this. And then what we need to do is define 2 past questions. All right, now this is getting a little too big, so let's break this one down now. And you can indent this too. Okay, so what am I saying here? I'm saying, so test 2 past questions. So the questions index page may display multiple questions. So we also want to see that it doesn't just display one question, it displays multiple ones, right? So we have past question 1, which was created 30 days ago. We have past question 2, which was created 5 days ago. We get the polls index page, and then we say, make sure that the question list, actually, let's do it like this because I think it'll be more readable actually. So we want to say that this should equal to this. Okay. Latest question list should have both of the past questions. Why in this order? Because remember, the most recent ones, it shows it first, right? If we look at our views and how it does it, descending order, and then the 5. So that's why I would show the past question 2 first, and then this one right here. Cool. Basically, the most recent question, it should show all the way at the top. All right, so first is a question shortcut function, create question to take some repetition. Yeah, we pretty much went over this whole thing, so we don't have to check that. And so on. In effect, we are using the test to tell a story of admin input and user experience on the site, and checking that at every state and for every new change in the state of the system, the expected results are published. Now, that's a really important point. Like, you're telling a story with your test, guys. Like, this is what's really important to understand. So if you're working on a team with somebody and somebody's reading through your test, they understand what each of your view is supposed to do and what it's supposed to return. Like, so key. Like, if I'm looking at somebody's code, I don't know what the hell it's supposed to do, right? I don't know what the right answer is supposed to be. But if I look at their test and they have like bunch of examples and what the correct answer and the wrong answer should be, and they have these documentations, I totally understand what each function is supposed to do, what each class is supposed to do. And then effectively I'm on the same page, and then I can actually contribute to this project, right? I can go, that's where you guys hear like, hey, just go ahead and contribute to open source projects. This is one of the ways that you can do that. Understand, look at their tests first, and then like, I can't tell you enough for those of you who are a little bit more advanced, To understand a library, here's a pro tip. One of the best ways to do it is not just like, instead of just reading the code, go and look at their tests. And they will have so many things in there and what it's supposed to do. You'll start understanding how this library is supposed to work and it's how it's supposed to behave. Literally tells a story. Now we want to test the detail view, okay? So what we have works well. However, even though future questions don't appear in the index, users can still reach them if they know or guess the right URL. So we need to add a similar constraint to detail view. Okay, so we don't want our users to be able to reach those questions, obviously, because they don't exist. So they shouldn't just be able to go to that particular URL. Okay, like let's say you had a blog post like whatever, your blog post is called banana. So it's like john.com/blog/banana. If you scheduled it for like a month later, I shouldn't be able to just go to it from the URL. Okay, so what's going on here? We have the detail view. So let's go into our views. Let's go into our detail view. It's right here. What do they want us to do? They want us to create a query set and do this with it. Okay. Excludes any questions that aren't published yet. So filter, make sure the publication date is less than or equal to then the time zone.now. That's it. That's essentially it. And those are the only ones you can check. Pretty cool. Okay, very, very powerful. Again, you can see how powerful the generic method is. And of course, we will add some tests to check that a question whose publication date is in the past can be displayed, and now one with a publication date in the future is not. So let's go into our tests, and let's add the test for this. So again, it's a new class. It should have its own methods and everything, right? So for the index view, we created a class, okay, for those tests. And now for our detail views, we're also creating a class, okay, very important. Now we test future question and we test past question. How do we do that? We create the question 5 days in advance. We send you to the polls detail page. So like, for example, on Instagram, if you click into a image and it shows you that specific image, that's the equivalent in our app of polls detail, a questions detail view. And for the arguments, we give it that questions ID from right here. And as a response, we get that particular URL, and then we say, hey, make sure that the response actually returns a 404. And it will, because here's how we told it. And then test past question. So basically here we're saying 404 meaning it doesn't exist, right? So the detailed view of a question with the publication date in the past displays the question's text. So past question, we create the question here. It was created 5 days ago. We get the URL for the polls detail, and we pass in the ID for the past question. And then as a response, we get that specific URL. And then we assert and make sure that the response contains the following thing. So response, and then it should have the question text in there. Okay, so past question, question text. Cool. And let's see. Let's see if we're going to be using any more command line stuff. We're not. So let's go and exit. And let's just see right now if our tests are working. In our poll/views, something is happening on line 18. What is happening? Okay. It's not indented correctly, obviously. save, up and enter. And look at that. All our tests ran in here, and they all ran successfully. So you can see all these tests have already gotten pretty complicated, and they're testing our app pretty thoroughly. You know, this is not something you want to do manually every single time, and you can already see the power of it. All right, ideas for more tests. So we have to add similar query set method to results view and create a new test class for that view. So we can also test results view. It'll be very similar to what we have just created. In fact, there will be a lot of repetition. We could also improve our application in other ways, adding tests along the way. For example, it's silly that questions can be published on the site that have no choices. So our views could check for this and exclude such questions. Our tests could create a question without choices and then test that it's not published, as well as create a similar question with choices and test that it is published. Also, you can have logged in admin users who should be allowed to see unpublished questions, but like ordinary visitors shouldn't be. So if you're an admin, right, and you have WordPress blog and you schedule one in advance, you can see it, but other people can't. Just like I can't schedule my YouTube videos, you can't see it, I can. Whatever needs to be added to the software to accomplish this should be accompanied by a test. Whether you write the test first and then make the code pass the test, this is the test-driven way of doing it, or work out the logic in your code first and then write a test to prove it. At a certain point, you're bound to look at your test and wonder whether your code is suffering from test bloat, which brings us to the following. So the thing that they say is, when testing, more is actually better. Okay, so it might seem that your test is going out of control and there's a lot of like test bloat, and you know what, your beautiful, elegant, and concise code compared to your test looks so much better. That's totally okay. Tests are supposed to be bulky and a lot, and they should cover your ass. Okay, that's their job, and so they don't have to look pretty, they don't have to look beautiful, they have to tell a story and have to tell it clearly. So it doesn't matter, right? Let them grow. And for the most part, you can write a test once and then forget about it. It will continue performing its useful function as you continue to develop your program. Sometime they will need to be updated, just like we had to update ours, telling us exactly which test needs to be amended to bring them up to date. So that extent, tests help look after themselves. At worst, as you continue developing, you might find that you have some tests that are redundant. In testing, redundancy is actually a good thing, and even that redundancy is not a problem. Okay, so the more you test, the better, and you don't have to go back and wipe anything clean. As long as they're sensibly arranged, they won't become unmanageable. Okay, so the good rules of thumb include the following. You should have a separate test class for each model or view. So remember, for each of our models, right, our question model test, we had a different class for this. And for each of our views, we actually had a different class. For our detail view, we had a different class for our index view. And if we wanted to go further, we could also add a different class for our results view. A separate test method for each set of conditions you want to test. So instead of testing test no questions, test pass question, and kind of like testing it all in one, it's a good idea to break it down into separate different tests, each test doing only one job. So here, if no questions exist, an appropriate message displayed. That's what test is supposed to do. This test over here, questions with a publication date in the past are displayed on the index page. So you can see each test is trying to do one thing only. Okay. Test method names that describe their function. So the names themselves should describe the function of the test. Okay, so test no questions, test past questions, test future questions. And once you build this naming convention, you and your team starts understanding it. And most of the times, you guys will be able to just look at each other's tests and know what your app is supposed to be doing or what it's not supposed to be doing. Further testing. This tutorial only introduces some of the basics of testing. There's a great deal more that you can do and a number of very useful tools at your disposal to achieve some very clever things. For example, so this is a pretty cool part. Right now, we just kind of tested our back end and a little bit of our front end. But what if we wanted to test our JavaScript and how it loads and literally like moving the mouse, like have the computer move the mouse and select one of the votes and click vote? How does that experience work? How can we test that on autopilot where it happens automatically? Well, there's something called Selenium, and it's a way to test your HTML. Actually renders in a browser. Okay, so these tools allow you to check not just the behavior of your Django code, but also, for example, of your JavaScript and your browser. Pretty freaking mind-blowing. It's quite something to see the tests launch a browser and start interacting with your site as if a human being were driving it. And Django includes live server test case to facilitate integration with tools like Selenium. Okay, so if you want to get more advanced, look up Django and Selenium, and you could even look up YouTube videos online and add those kind of tests within your app. If you have a complex application, you may want to run tests automatically with every commit for the purposes of continuous integration. So if you guys know about GitHub and commits, you can make it so that when you're writing the code and as soon as you commit it, I like to call it like the time machine, because that's what Git and version control allows you to do. You can make it so then it tests it on every commit, so that if any one of your commits fails any of the tests, it'll be like, hey, this is broken, and you'll find out right away before you actually push that code onto GitHub and destroy your life, embarrass yourself, let down your family, and be fired from your job. So that quality control, it is itself at least partially automated. A good way to spot untested parts of your application is to check code coverage. This also helps identify fragile or even dead code. If you can't test a piece of code, it usually means that code should be refactored or removed. Those are some big words. Coverage will help to identify dead code. See integration with coverage.py. And you can check, what's dead code and what's not. And so a lot of testing. I hope that you enjoyed that. In the next part of the tutorial, we're going to be learning about static files management. Okay, so that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I do want to leave you with this. I have my course, The Profitable Programmer. It's just a badass course that helps you become an awesome Python Django developer. It also shows you how to charge what you're worth and get your first client with Python in less than 90 days. The focus is on helping you get clients, helping you get work. If you are interested, again, here's the link, and the link should also be in the description. Go to that page and sign up and join the VIP waitlist. And as my gift to you, I will give you a Python earning potential calculator so you can see how much your earning potential could be as a Python developer. Okay? And I'm going to be giving you that obviously for free. And by joining the VIP waitlist, you will be the first to know when the course, The Profitable Programmer, opens up. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I love your faces off, and I'll see you in the next video. Whoosh.